Hello and welcome back to the Chelmsford News Show. I'm Tom Christiano. Well, this is part 2 of our post-election analysis show, and I'm here with Joe Reddy and Glenn Thoren. And we're going to have a couple of more local issues before we get into the national topics, which are also, I think, going to be very interesting. So we didn't get to question 3 yet on the ballot, and that had to do with a yes vote would have increased alcohol licenses. A yes vote got 45% during the election, but the no's got 55%. So this went down to defeat. And Joe Reddy used to have some sort of a liquor store, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. It was I had an all-alcohol beverage license. It's considered what they call a Section 15 license.
Yeah.
And basically, that's your off-premise retail stores. The bill was looking to basically secure those shops against essentially large grocers and other retailers. They wanted them to be able to hold more licenses. And it was trying to basically create more restrictions on the sale of alcohol, which on the surface sound great, but the reality of it is it's just to basically keep larger retailers from being able to operate efficiently. And so at the end of the day, I think people saw through that and ultimately voted it down. There were a couple of other caveats that I mentioned off air, which is that you have some of these online companies like Drizzly that allow for alcohol transportation and sales. We've had customers that were disabled, couldn't go to the actual store, so we would deliver to them. They're all verified, online and everything, and the actual driver will verify when they get there. But it was left kind of in a gray area as to how that would be handled should that have passed. So. For many reasons, I think it was the right move to vote it down.
This didn't have anything to do with giving supermarkets the right to sell alcohol, did it?
No.
Okay.
It's just that. So one of the provisions was that should you have sold alcohol to a minor, let's say you were a grocery store, you'd be shut down for 3 days, or you could pay a fine that would be the equivalent of not your alcohol sales, but your total sales. Whereas like a package store is only going to go off of their alcohol sales because that's all they sell, right? But they wanted to punish grocery stores, probably 100-fold because their daily sales are obviously much higher. So you know what? Massachusetts is behind in its times. If you go to other states, you can see that it works really well. I've been down to Texas. I've been to other places where large grocers are able to work with volume. And
New Hampshire.
Yeah, New Hampshire's a good example. And they can pass the cost savings on to consumers, which is really ultimately who you're trying to help out. So.
Yes. Great. Thank you, Joe. Glenn?
He said it all.
Okay, great.
I'm with Joe.
Sorry, I happen to do a lot in that space.
Me too. So we'll go on to question number 4, which would keep the driver's license law the same for undocumented immigrants. That's what the question 4 would do. It won by 53.8% of the vote, and the no's at 46.2% of the vote. So, Glenn, I know you have some opinions on this, right?
Yes, because number one, illegal aliens should not be in this country in the first place. They come in freely because we have a wide open border. A country without a border is not a country. So, we've got somewhere between 3.5 and 5 million illegal immigrants that have entered this country at the invitation of the administration since Joe Biden took office. I think that's wrong. How many times has Joe Biden been down to the border to see how many illegal immigrants are pouring across? 0. And the person in charge of it, Kamala Harris, has been down to the border 0 times. And when you ask his Secretary of Homeland Security, is the border secure? He says, yeah, the border's secure. He's lying, because anybody can see that it's wide open. Thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands are coming across each month. So last year we had like 2.5 million that they accounted for that came across the border. So all the Border Patrol is doing is registering them. Hey, you came in, they gave me a name, that's a name. Off we go, and we'll see you in court in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And to give illegal immigrants driver's licenses means that you're saying for this particular state, well, it's okay. They're here. They're illegal. They shouldn't be here, but they're here. Let's give them driver's license and insurance and stuff like that. And I think it's just the premise is wrong, and it shouldn't happen.
And Joe? Yeah.
I looked at it more. I voted yes because I think from more of a pragmatic standpoint, they're already here. You already have to deal with it. I've actually known builders and people that have used illegal immigrants as part of their process. and they go driving around these trucks, and they're undocumented, and should they get into an accident or something happens, they're unlicensed, uninsured. There is a benefit, I think, and if you look at how the state has approached this, it wasn't just thought out yesterday. I mean, they brought together all the agencies and they looked at it. They brought together the police chiefs. They brought together the Secretary of State. And they said, you know what, this will actually, I think, help the Commonwealth, at least from a documentation standpoint. Now, certainly, Glenn brings up some valid points, and there are things that need to be looked into, especially with voting and all of those things. But from my perspective, I looked at it more like the problem exists. I'm not necessarily trying to solve the immigration problem with this, more trying to solve the fact that, should my, loved one be in an accident with an undocumented, worker, I'd like to at least know who that person is. They have a license, they have insurance. You can at least recover some damages as a result. But it's not going to solve the problem overall anyway.
You don't know whether their name's their real name or a name they gave crossing the border. And when you incentivize them by saying, hey, you go to Massachusetts, you get a driver's license, you can do all this stuff, you don't have to be a legal citizen, you can come here illegally. When is it going to be enough? How many years?
Okay,
how many millions?
Thank you. Yeah.
There's always challenges, quite frankly, and you have to just address them as they come. I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that nothing is clear and as cut and dry as, you stay here, you go here. It's not going to. People are crazy. You got to figure out a system one way or another.
The first answer is close the border.
Yeah, and just very quickly, Joe summarized it from my perspective as well. Why I voted yes on this. Or no to keep it the way it is, because we don't want people driving around without licenses, without insurance, and that kind of thing. So that's make the best of a bad situation. But why don't we go on to the governor's race? Because our time is just quickly going through. This is crazy. So just quickly on the governor's race, this is my understanding the first time we had a female elected in her own right to be governor of Massachusetts. Maura Healey won with 63.6% of the vote. She's a Democrat. And Jeff Deal received 34.8% of the vote.
65-35.
Yeah, again.
Every place in the
so we did,
state.
as you may recall, we had a female governor about 20 years ago, but she just took over when a previous governor left for health reasons, I believe. So
Jane Swift.
Yeah, Swift. So anyway, Maura Healey won, first female governor. In fact, we have females down the line here for Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer. So we're really led by a lot of females coming up in January, or when they're inaugurated. So any quick thoughts on this before we go to the national elections?
I think if you look back to, this is just to go into a Democratic or Republican type of standpoint, if you look back to what Charlie Baker did when he won the governor 8 years ago. I mean, his ground game was phenomenal, and I didn't see any of that from Deal at all. They really needed to put more effort into it, and I don't think Charlie Baker really helped Deal in any capacity in trying to help transition. Like, if he really wanted Deal to win, he could have done quite a bit more to do that. So it was almost like a foregone conclusion at some point that, should Maura Healey win the nomination from the Democratic side, that she would ultimately win the general, just because there wasn't enough, I think, support on that level to win it.
Yes.
But you have to understand, Massachusetts is a deep blue, heavily left-leaning state. For example, in the Senate in Massachusetts, 37 Democrats, 3 Republicans. That's a little bit overweighted. In the House, 129 Democrats, 21 Republicans. So Massachusetts is far, far left as a deep blue state. Kind of a little bit like Illinois, if you look at Illinois. Not so much New York anymore, because that flipped a lot of seats. But Massachusetts is a liberal left state.
Yes.
The secret to a Republican win is in independent voters.
Yes.
Like, if you look at Chelmsford, right? There's more registered Democrats in Chelmsford than there are Republicans. But there are far more independents in Chelmsford than either party.
Yes.
And so I think and this is where, unfortunately for like Charlie Baker, where he gets labeled a rhino and all this stuff, to survive in a state like Massachusetts, you have to be a rhino.
Yes.
You can't take unfortunately, and I'm a big moderate myself, you can't take these polarizing super right or super left wing philosophies and come into a state that's super deep blue or super deep red and think you're going to win it. And a good Manchin is a good example of somebody that understands, listen, I know that Democrats in Massachusetts hate me because I come out and I talk about coal and all these things, but he can't survive in a state like West Virginia without actually having that type of rhetoric, right? So it's, you got to know your audience, and I think that's where, you know, Baker, Romney, those guys were good at understanding those things. Deal didn't do any of the things he needed to do to make that happen. So he, you know, he's going to lose just in the wave. It's just the way it goes.
I also think he lost a lot of votes because he backed up the former President Donald Trump. And many people in Massachusetts can't stand Donald Trump and don't think he should be anywhere near political office. I think that hurt Jeff Deal a great deal. I know I have no respect for him after doing that.
In a deep blue state, you're not going to win with a Donald Trump-backed philosophy. But you will. But I will tell you this: if you look nationwide, he primaried out almost everybody. So you can say like Donald Trump, you know, his philosophies didn't work, but I mean, you can look at Liz Cheney, gone. He just went through and just
for the primaries, but the general, which we'll talk about
right. But
next.
again, the general's going to come down to, you know, a hard-fought battle. It depends on what the philosophies of the state are and the philosophies of the voters
for example,
are.
If you're in Ohio, they really did want to know what Donald Trump thought about the candidate. You know, in Ohio, in Florida.
I think Georgia's still up in the air, is it?
Georgia's going to be up in the
Right?
air.
they're going to have a runoff.
Like in those states where it's a 50-50, you know, that's where you got to look at and say, okay, well, did his candidate pull it out in the end, right? I mean, you can't look at a place like Massachusetts and say, did Donald Trump's backed candidate make it?
Or Illinois or anything.
Well, he got hurt because he was a Donald Trump supporter. Anybody, in my opinion, who could support somebody who is so untruthful, so narcissistic.
You mean Joe Biden?
No, I mean Donald J.
sorry.
Trump.
You're talking about Joe Biden.
The twice impeached, disgraced former president. Anybody who could support a guy who lies with every word that comes out of his mouth.
That's Joe Biden, Tom. You know
no,
it's Joe
no,
Biden. Joe Biden didn't finish in the top half
Donald
of
J.
his
Trump.
case. Joe Biden did not get accepted to the Naval Academy. Joe Biden's son didn't die in Iraq. Joe Biden's other son, yes, had a laptop, even though Biden lied about it in the debate. He knew all about that. So, you know, Joe Biden goes on from lie to lie to lie, and people think it's okay. And then he demonizes people by saying, if you vote for Republican, democracy as you know it is over. Total garbage.
It isn't garbage.
Well, of course
Unfortunately,
it's garbage. It makes no sense.
You know how many
voted for
election
Republicans.
deniers were on the ballot
Now,
this
there's
time?
another
Over
thing.
300.
What is
Many of them
an
said,
election denier,
look
Tom? What is a denier? Somebody that questions some of the election?
No, that was adjudicated in courts over
if
60 times.
So the people that he
Joe
counted as
Biden won that
election deniers,
election.
Tom, the people he counted as election deniers were people that had questions about how some votes were counted, so they automatically take them just like the bucket of deplorables, like Hillary Clinton said, put them in the bucket of deplorables, call them an election denier, even though they questioned somehow the votes were
No,
counted.
they
That's
were
how
not
it works.
handling our democracy properly. When you lose an election, you should concede gracefully, hopefully,
Like Stacey
and then move
Abrams
on.
did, like Hillary Clinton did, right? Hillary Clinton called Trump an illegitimate president all the time.
The next day,
Stacey
she conceded. She was on TV, and she
for
conceded
years after
gracefully.
that,
She allowed
Let's
for the
face it.
peaceful transfer of
years after
power.
that, for years
With
after
Donald
that, she
Trump,
said
he's
he's an
basically-
illegitimate
he basically
president,
is
so
ruining
he's
our
not
country.
the president anymore. Trump's policies, I will talk to you about his policies, not his personality. I will talk to you about his policies one by one and show you how they are infinitely better than what we're facing right now. Russia would not have invaded Ukraine. There was no inflation. Gas was $2 a gallon. The border was secure, much more secure than now.
He is the instigator of the inflation that we had. He overspent tremendously. He was one of the biggest deficit spender in the history of our country, Donald J. Trump.
The biggest deficit introduction for inflation, it didn't occur before this, was the first time that Biden passed that infrastructure budget for $1.1 trillion. And it went on from there. You just look at when
infrastructure
inflation
improvements.
started. Well, we do, but it was not that much. And a lot of it went to pay for his climate change.
And that's one of
folks.
the biggest problems in the world. And we need to address global climate
But
change tremendously.
Biden says no drilling, Stop fracking.
I don't
I'm
think
going to
he's
kill
been saying that now. I think they're
He
allowing
just-
a lot of drilling.
Biden just said 2 days ago there'll be no drilling. I'm not going to sign any more leases.
Oh, any more
First-
leases? That's
first
different than
thing,
saying
well, he
no
hasn't
drilling.
been signing any
He's
leases.
been encouraging a lot of us to get the oil and the resources out
No,
right now when we
no,
need
he
it. And
has
there's
not.
a war in Ukraine has caused a lot of these problems.
Well, the
and
inflation
Joe Biden had
started
nothing to do with that.
well before the war in Ukraine. Inflation started well before that.
Yeah, when Donald Trump was overspending
No,
too,
no,
and the previous presidents too.
For
A lot
a
of them
year,
overspent.
for a year, when Donald Trump's policies were in place, when Biden first got elected, everything was fine. But when Biden's policies began to take effect, that's when inflation started. A year later, so you just look at the charts.
We were going through the pandemic, a worldwide pandemic,
Yeah,
which
I think you have
caused
to look at the
supply
amount of money
shortages.
that was dumped into
And
the
you-
economy through the pandemic. I mean, you can't take all this funding, throw
Right.
it out there, grow the amount of money that's in the economy, and not expect some sort of inflationary standpoint. I do think they should have. The Feds did try to bring the rate up a little bit back in 2019. I think they were trying to slowly get up. Donald did push them to bring it back down. I remember him beating up
Yeah,
on
because he
the
wanted to
Federal
help it with
Reserve.
the election with lower interest rates.
I don't know. I'm trying to decide whether or not that had a major impact. It could have.
So
But he
our
overspent a lot.
energy
Donald
economy-
Trump overspent during his terms of office. It wasn't a balanced budget at all.
Every president
But
has
it was
been doing
more.
that, but
It was
not like
so
this
much.
president has done.
It was so
trillions
much.
upon trillions.
It got
First
rid
thing,
of environmental
do you realize that
regulations?
the energy
Very-
industry and the cost of gas and diesel and everything is over 30% of what causes inflation? It's 30 to 40%. And the first thing that Biden did was he closed down the pipeline, he closed down drilling in Alaska, he closed down offshore drilling. He said, I am going to end the fossil fuel industry. Now, that's a signal to all
In the
the oil
future,
companies.
we need to end that if we want to have
I
breathing
won't
children and
disagree with you.
grandchildren.
In the future,
Because
but
we need global climate
The
change to be
Chinese
addressed.
have paid the Biden
It wasn't-
families millions of dollars. Millions of dollars come from China to the Biden family. And let me ask you a question. Who builds the batteries for all these electric cars? Who builds most of the solar cells? Who builds most of the windmills?
Do you
Where
know
does
the
all
new-
that money go?
What about the new law that was
China.
passed, which is incentivizing the companies to build the batteries and the electric cars
But
right
they
here
don't
in
exist.
the United States?
If we do that,
We're-
that's
no,
a
we're
different
starting to do
situation.
it.
But
That's the new law.
It's
the
5
new
to
law
10
that we just
law is
passed.
fine, but it's 5 to 10 years away. In the meantime, the Chinese
It's not
make
5 to
billions.
10 years. It's starting next year. There's huge
Where do the
incentives.
chemicals for the batteries come from? Where does the lithium come from? The manganese? Where it
Right.
comes from China and some from South Africa.
Well,
But,
they're
you know,
doing a lot, the best they can to get it produced here. It's refining the lithium that's the problem, I think, not the amount of lithium on the earth. But, the Donald J. Trump.
think
this is
the-
good.
the issue
we
is
could
how-
have a separate
yeah.
show on this.
The issue is it's hard to compete against China on certain things because they don't have the same level of human rights that we do here, right? So they can work workers at such a lower cost, and then when it all comes down to it, consumers still want the cheapest price, and
Right.
it's a
Let
hard
the
balance.
consumers decide. If it's a $70,000 electric car, how many consumers can step out and buy one of those?
But the prices are going to keep coming down,
That'll be
Glenn.
good, and then the consumers make the choice,
Yes.
which is important.
Yeah,
It's
which
not the
they are.
government making the choice for the consumers.
consumers are
In
making the choice
California,
now. You
California
can't-
says, we're not going to have any more gas-powered cars sold after 2030 or something like that.
All right.
That won't happen.
Oh,
'cause
yes, it will.
That's insane.
Oh, it will happen.
it will not.
The prices of electric cars are going to keep coming down, Glenn.
Biden
and by
said we have to get the price of
2035
gasoline up so high that we can't
No,
afford it.
no,
and,
the
and that
prices
way
of-
people will have to buy electric cars.
No, they're going to want to buy them
made
because
from
the electric
parts
cars
from China.
are going to be so much more efficient. They're going to be so much better for the environment.
I hope you're
and they're
right.
so much cheaper. Nope.
But the batteries are coming from where?
The batteries are going to be
The
made all over
Well,
the place.
we're in a
Sumerian-
global economy at this point. I would say, in fairness, that the policies that they are trying to implement are to encourage and incentivize, energy efficiency and solar and clean energy, right? Like that. That is a good thing. The problem is, I think Putin exposed us in some respects, is that. There's a lot of dependence on other energy sources
now,
that
yes.
I don't think people recognize, right? Like, you may have an electric car, but how are you actually powering that electric car? Like, it could be electric, but
So
is it?
coal-fired plants provide 30%
So,
of that
so
power.
you have to start working on, okay, how do we get more clean energy into the system before you can just start taking away some of the other energy sources? Because
Exactly right,
cheap
Joe.
energy is actually how good economies run, right? And I'm not saying we don't want to just abuse the environment. So you want to work on trying to get these things done. But you have to also be cognizant of the fact that, you
yes.
do depend on some of these things.
If you do not have cheap energy, you can't run a good economy, just like you said. And so when the government right now, everything. When the government right now is trying to put us in a situation where we have to be dependent on other sources of energy we don't have, or manufacturers that are over in China, it weakens the United States. So if I was designing a way to weaken the United States, if I was China, I would be doing exactly what we're looking at right now. Make energy very expensive, make a lot of the key products resourced from China, neodymium magnets, samarium cobalt magnets, lithium for batteries, what solar panels are made very inexpensive in China. That's what I would do to weaken your country, while China is building a coal-fired plant every week. Why? Because they need energy in order to grow their economy. And they're very happy the United States has less and less energy.
Well, it's a transitional period, though. We need more energy, like from the fossil fuels right now during the transitional period. But it's such a great thing to incentivize electric cars. We're going to have solar power so that you'll have most roofs on new homes should have solar roofs on them so that they generate the energy right there. Then you have an energy storage devices, which we have now, which will power your home during an energy crisis for 3 or 4 days. Yeah. No, they're expensive.
They're expensive.
Yeah.
The problem is that the regulations are what kill everything.
Oh, right. You had one. Yeah, I know
well,
you had that problem.
For instance, like as a homeowner, you should be able to build a solar power system, powers your whole house, and you shouldn't have to pay all these fees to National Grid and all this stuff. But those companies, they come in, they pay for mailings, they give the politicians money, and then as the general consumer, you're trying to get these things done, or for instance, like net metering. Like, you should be able to power the grid back and get paid for it. If you can build out a solar power system on your house.
Not at a discount, but at full price.
Right.
Yeah. And so right now, you're a realtor, I've spoken to realtors, they say homes with solar panels all over the roof don't sell as well as homes that don't have them.
Ones with leased solar power systems. Because the problem with leased solar power is you've given up your rights on your roof, and people worry about that.
Yeah.
If you own the system, you generally do okay.
Yeah. Well, why don't we go on to some thoughts about this election, which occurred this past Tuesday on November 8th. And I'll ask your overall thoughts on it, but I would like to begin with, usually on a midterm election, if you have a Democrat president, usually there's many seats that are lost. I think in President Obama, 2010, he lost about 60 seats in Congress. And almost every midterm, it's huge losses. This time, that did not happen. And though it was expected to happen by many pundits, thought, oh, the Democrats are going to get killed. And the exact opposite happened. In fact, the Democrats may still retain control of the Senate. There's still 3 or 4 races that need to be decided. But it looks like they're going to retain control of the Senate. And the House, it looks like the House is going to go to Republican control, but only by about 5, 6, 7 seats. So
we'll have to see about that one.
Many seats were not going over to the Republicans as expected previously. So it was a big success for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
How many seats did the Republicans end up with after those 63 seats were transferred during the Obama administration? What was the total that they started out with after that transition?
I don't have the
240.
numbers.
So if the Republicans pick up just a modest amount of seats, say 20, they're going to be in the mid-230s, which is kind of like 240, but it's enough to run the House. So they don't have to win 60 seats.
Yeah, they're going to run the House.
They don't have to run 60
It looks
seats,
like they're definitely going to win the House, even though it's still up in the air right now. But it looks like the Republicans are going to take the House. But thank God they're not going to have both, because what would happen is to really
they're going to win Nevada, so that makes it 50-50. Right, so the question
I don't know if they're going to win Nevada. That's still up in the air.
We'll see. That out as an optimistic
the Democrats are going to win Arizona again with Kelly, Mark Kelly.
Probably so, yeah. But they won't win the state house.
And then in Georgia, I think the Democrat hopefully is going to win there. You don't want somebody like Herschel Walker.
Oh, you do.
This,
of course
this
you do.
Tremendous lying, disgusting human being who we all make mistakes.
You vote against,
but
he's lying.
He's lying about it. That's what gets me about every time he lies. I didn't know this woman. I didn't do this. I didn't pay for her abortion. It's all lies, Glenn.
Well, do you remember when Judge Kavanaugh was being nominated?
You see that though, his lies, right?
I don't see that because I don't see the women come up and introduce themselves and say this happened and show proof.
But they showed the proof though. That's the thing though.
They didn't.
Yep. Yeah, but to the certain people who they want to show it to, because they don't want to let the whole world know that that's happened to them.
When you have a
But
party,
they showed the
party
proof.
that controls most of the
This
media,
guy-
print and television media, like the Democrats do, you get one side of the story, and that's all you get. And so when Hunter Biden's laptop was obviously out there to show that the
Yeah, but we're
president
talking
was
about Herschel Walker
compromised.
right now, Glenn, not Hunter Biden. Though that'll come up, I'm sure, in Congress
We were
next year.
talking about President Trump, so I figured going backwards was something
Yeah,
you wanted to
but
do.
no, I want to talk about
So-
people he endorsed. He's responsible for the Republicans not winning the Senate. He got
Herschel
Dr.
Walker.
Oz. He pushed Dr. Oz to run in Pennsylvania, and he lost.
Well, Dr. Oz was a long shot, in my opinion.
He's even from New Jersey, but Donald Trump pushed him. That's why
Well-
people I'm listening to on all the analysts are saying Donald Trump was a big loser in this election on Tuesday. Donald J. Trump.
So
And-
when you tally up the amount of people that Trump supported versus the amount of people that won that Trump supported, you'll find a different story. You're probably listening to NPR, CNN, MSNBC.
I do a
because
lot of reading.
If you look at New York, what happened in New York? There were many seats
Right.
flipped
So-
in New York.
so it could happen
by
anywhere.
people that were supported by Donald Trump, including
Well-
taking out the head of the DCCC.
I know, but it was
John
a close
Patrick Maloney.
election, though.
Yeah, so
on
the
that one.
Democrats tried
But
to
what about Oz? He has Oz
regerrymandering
come
the
in, and they
state.
lose Pennsylvania. They flipped that from Republican to Democrat. Why? Because of Donald J. Trump. We have a guy he put up there, Herschel Walker, who is not qualified at all to be a U.S.
Well, so
senator.
you're telling me
all
that
you got to
John
do
Fetterman is
is listen to him
qualified to
talk.
be
The
a
guy
US
can't put a
John
paragraph
Fetterman
together.
can't put a sentence together.
He just had a stroke, Glenn.
Yeah, well,
That's
he-
temporary.
Why would so the reason it's not temporary?
It is
People in
temporary.
No, it is
He's
not.
recovering
you're
better and
not-
better
you're
every
not-
day.
No, he's
Oh,
not.
yes, yes,
Did you
he's
hear the
gonna-
debate?
Yeah, but
And did you hear the
he still
interviews
hasn't
after
fully
the debate?
recovered yet.
He couldn't put a sentence
He
together.
still has recovering,
so
Glenn.
the reason
He's
why
not-
he
he's a
won-
good person
The
who's-
reason why sure he wants to let the criminals out of jail. He wants
No.
to legalize drugs. Well, he
Well-
did say he wanted to legalize all drugs. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. But I don't. I think he'll be judicious in whatever he votes on.
Judicious in legalizing all drugs. That's
Oh, no.
That
the
sounds
thing
like a stretch that he'd want to legalize all drugs.
Yeah,
I can't-
right.
that's what he said.
Well,
Can't
we'll see,
imagine.
Glenn.
So you
I
got to
think
go
he's
by
good.
what he said.
But he's a good man. He's very concerned about the people of Pennsylvania. He is from Pennsylvania. This other guy's from New Jersey. He didn't even know, have a home in Pennsylvania before he started running. He doesn't know anything about
Massachusetts
Pennsylvania.
would never elect somebody
He's a
that's from
lying.
out of state, would they?
He's one of these.
Like from Utah or someplace like that,
That would.
He's talking about
we
Romney.
had Mitt Romney. Yeah. So, but this guy though, he would come on TV and
Elizabeth
sell.
Warren. I'm
He
just
would
saying.
sell, potions that didn't work to poor people.
Well, we'll see
and
how
he made a
Fetterman does.
fortune.
The
He has a
reason why
number of
Fetterman
homes,
got elected
including
is
in Turkey, I
Fetterman
believe.
hid
He's a
his
citizen
health-
of Turkey.
Fetterman hid his health situation, will not release his records. How many times will he asked to release his medical
He's
records?
been
I won't
very
do it.
public about
I won't
having
do
a
it.
stroke.
Yeah, but he won't release his medical records. It could be far worse than that.
Well,
In-
I don't-
In
Donald Trump
Pennsylvania,
didn't release his tax returns after he said
Right,
he
after
released
he
them.
said
So
he
I
would.
mean,
In
I don't
Pennsylvania,
know.
What about
Trump
that,
wasn't
Glenn?
on the ballot.
And what
In
about all the
Pennsylvania-
illegal things that
in
Donald Trump
Pennsylvania,
has
they
done?
mailed out the votes 90 days before the election so they could, and people that far out from the election don't hear what the candidates stand for, don't look at how their health situation is, so they put in their votes, 7, 8 weeks before the election. And how do they vote at that particular time? I suggest the big cities, which is how they do it, they'll go down and say Democrat, 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 and they'll send the vote in. And then they begin to realize that you have a candidate that's mentally compromised and has.
Oh, that's temporary.
and
He has a stroke, but he's
it's
going to
not
recover.
temporary.
He's starting to
Have you talked to
recover.
a doctor about this? Because I've talked to doctors about
Well,
this, people with strokes.
I know a
and
lot of
their-
people
their
with strokes
chances of
recover.
recovering.
But Glenn, you're presenting your part very well, your case, the best you
Excuse
can.
me.
I must admit that. But however, we disagree on this because I
Yeah,
think
it's a big
Donald
mistake
Trump
for the people
is
of Pennsylvania.
is hurting our country so much. He actually, hopefully, will be indicted soon for all the illegal things he's done, and he hopefully will be in jail soon.
And you think Hunter Biden should be indicted as well, right?
Well,
and Joe Biden for taking money from Hunter Biden that came from overseas. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think Hunter Biden should be investigated. I think everything should
But you don't
come
think he
out.
should be
But
indicted?
Glenn, our time is run out.
Oh,
But thank you.
too bad.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you, Joe.
It's not
We got to
boring.
do this again sometime. Thank you very much. Thanks. I'm Tom Christiano. Ciao.